Hey guys, I hope you had a great New Year's and made it through Omicron in one piece. It's been a while since I released a new episode. I've been kind of slacking on that front, but I promise, this episode totally makes up for the wait. Things have just been super busy these past few months, and we've been slammed with a bunch of really exciting projects. I'm jumping right back into it with an episode that I've been looking forward to for a long time. Christopher Bauder, the founder of Whitevoid, was one of the people that I had in mind when I started the Luminous Arts podcast in the first place. I was in Berlin for the Touch Designer Summit when I first saw his work. It was a performance called Skalar, and it was being shown in this old abandoned transit station. It was just crazy to me that thousands of people would gather to watch a performance centered around lighting and visuals. The music was just a supporting element, not even the focus of the show. Whitevoid creates some of the most amazing light performances I've ever seen. They combine kinetic lighting, lasers, and music in a totally unique way. It's like he's using light as a fluid to fill a three-dimensional space. Our conversation wanders, like conversations on this podcast tend to do. We start by talking about our youths and how growing up in the techno scene in Berlin really shaped his artistic path. Both of us spent our early years exploring the techno scenes in the places where we grew up, which led us to experimenting with the visual arts. Even though we grew up in different times and on different continents, there's a lot of shared experience between us that was really interesting to explore. I've been waiting for years to have this conversation, and I'm excited for the next time Chris and I can meet in person. I think you guys are really going to dig this conversation. I know that I did. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It's good to meet you face to face.
Yeah, very nice to talk.
Yeah. So how are things in Berlin right now? Things must be opening up again. Things are starting to become more open. Omicron
Yeah,
is
yeah. I mean, we're
really,
at the peak now of this Omicron wave, but everyone is already talking about opening up clubs again. We can have concert venues inside with 4,000 people again, outside up to 10,000. So that means soccer is back, the
yeah.
Germans' favorite pastime. So everyone's happy about that. So I think it will ease up very fast now because we realize that hospitals are not filling up and it's yeah, the wave is big, but it's not as dangerous anymore as it was before.
No, absolutely. I think that the United States is kind of a weird place because, essentially we're a bunch of different countries, and every one of those
Exactly.
countries has like a different idea about what it means to be safe. And I was talking
Yeah,
to a friend
true.
about this yesterday. It's almost like, the 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 procedures and the rituals around COVID vary from place to place depending on what the social consensus
Right.
of risk tolerances. So
Yeah,
here in
yeah.
California, people take it very seriously. Everybody masks and everybody's really serious about it.
Oh,
But
really?
you go a few states over and it's like COVID doesn't exist and has never existed, and
Uh,
it's just these set of like social parameters that you kind of have to abide by.
it's the same in Germany, even though we're much smaller. We have this subdivisions, and also the south is much more cautious. And the more to the north, and especially the more to the east you go, the former East German part, they're much more careless. So it's interesting to see. And then individually, I'm in Berlin, which is a melting pot of people from all over the world. So you also see there some people like being in home office now for 2 years, and others like myself, I don't care very much and just take the risk, but have more fun and more freedom, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you say east and west, like the east and the west, does that there was a much more stark division between East Berlin and West Berlin, right? And like culturally, that was like,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe 15, 20 years ago, that line was still kind of dissolving. Do you find that that's still like a divide? Is there still like a cultural difference between
No.
the two halves of the city, or is it pretty?
Today, for me, not really. I don't know how other people think, and I'm not from Berlin. I'm from the west of Germany, the southwest actually. But for me, it's kind of I don't feel it anymore. Also, the people I'm friends with, they're from all over the place, and also a lot of them from East Berlin or East Germany. But for me personally, it doesn't play any role anymore, and it's also really hard to see in the city where actually the wall was, because it's growing over basically with buildings that are built in the death zone and so on. So it's more and more disappearing, which is a good thing, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's like an inevitable thing. Anytime there's a divide that where the boundaries break down, that slowly erases over time. I was
Yeah,
listening to a really interesting podcast about the birth of techno and electronic music, and how
yeah,
really it was this partnership between Berlin and Detroit, and there was a lot of cross
yeah,
pollination between those two cities.
yeah,
And then in Berlin, you had these vast industrial neighborhoods which were full of buildings that could be used for like the physical locations for these events, and that was kind of like the fertile ground that allowed the Berlin techno scene to grow and spread. Um,
exactly. Yeah, it's exactly like that. I mean, the fall of the wall kind of spawned the development, not directly the development, but it created those empty spaces. Also, myself, when I moved to Berlin in '97, there's still a lot of empty or cheap spaces where I, as a student with my friends, we could have our kind of first studio and experimental place. And it was the same for the clubs. There were so many empty buildings that could just be occupied. And in every street, in every, I don't know, fifth building where I lived, there was a bar in the basement, just kind of not official, but there were empty spaces and they were used by people and to do creative things. And this is still what driving Berlin today, I think. What's the creative force behind Berlin is available space, affordable housing, all these kind of things that were attracting creative people from first from the west of Germany, then from Europe, then from the US, then from all over the planet. So this is still the wall, the void that the falling of the coming down of the wall left. That is still being the motor of the Berlin cultural scene today.
yeah, so you moved to Berlin kind of during this period where electronic music and that culture, really it's the culture that surrounded it, was very underground. It was very new
Totally.
and
Yeah.
pioneering.
Yeah.
And I was, my youth was spent in kind of the same different place, but kind of the same environment. I was very into the electronic music scene, very
Yeah.
into rave culture when it was coming up, and it was still very underground. And I kind of attribute that to where my interest in new media arts came from, because you know I read the article in Art Magazine. It's a fucking great article, by the way, but it gave me some insight into like your mentality behind the work that you do. And it's
Mhm.
and I'm just curious, like, do you think that being in a place where there was so much like counterculture and counter like new ideas blossoming,
Mhm.
it's almost like not only was that permission for musicians to get creative, but it was also permission for visual artists to get creative, right? And for me that
Totally.
was
Yeah.
VJing, and I
Yeah. Yeah.
came at this
Totally.
through the visual art scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Exactly the same for me. I grew up. I was socialized in the Berlin techno scene. So I was a techno kid even before I came to Berlin, and I was diving into that head on. And I came to Berlin to study at art school, and the main thing for me about art school was to meet the other freaks there. And every
Yeah.
night, one of them was either VJing somewhere or DJing somewhere, or opening a bar or decorating a club or doing anything related to club and underground culture, mostly electronic music and techno, especially. So I had like fantastic parties in the craziest places. I mean, if I tell people today, like, hey, in this shoe shop there was one of the craziest first wave drum and bass clubs in Berlin, and no one believes that today anymore. And it was such a crazy and vast kind of creative explosion at that time, and especially related for myself to VJing, because at that time, I mean, I had the mixer, I had huge like monitors, and was
Yeah, man.
lugging
So
around
you were a
all
VJ
that
as
stuff
well.
to like half of a small truck full just to do one VJ set at night. So I became
Yeah.
interested in in when I got my first my own computer and then later laptop, I became interested in, okay, can we not get that into a computer and have a software to do that? And I started creating my own first VJ software like Resolume and all this stuff that wasn't existing at that point. They also started out. Some of them even also started as programming in Flash or in Director at that time, and then later on they changed to a more serious platform. And I also had my first real-time 3D application that I was programming myself because I was creating most of my VJ stuff in 3D anyway. So I was like, why can I not directly mix it in 3D? Why do I have to go through making a time-based video out of it, putting it on a tape, and then playing it back on a video with a video mixer? And that kind
Yeah.
of really triggered my creative mind and my thinking, and projection mapping started, like first with one wall and two walls and all the walls, and then I was thinking, okay, why only the walls? Can we not like map the rest of the place, or like 3D objects and so on? So for me, really, that was kind of the driving force, the techno scene, especially the lighting and the decoration of the clubs. That was the most important thing for me, and that kind of, yeah, is still my inspiration till today.
That's cool, man. I went from VJing into the world of concert touring. Excuse me.
Yeah,
And it was around that time when the lines between video and lighting started to blur. And they called
yeah,
that convergence, right? When all of a sudden it's like you got a pixel, it could be a light, it could be a pixel on a screen, it could be a
exactly. Yeah,
projection. It doesn't
yeah,
matter.
yeah.
And that was kind of that was my crucible. That was where I
Mm,
really learned the tools that my company still uses today, in
yeah,
the architecture world. But it was a really interesting time when projection mapping was first starting to become, people were starting to become conscious of it and like the potential. It's like, okay, we're designing video in these 3D environments. These 3D environments, we're skinning them in the 3D environment. Why not take that skin and project it
yeah,
onto real objects?
yeah,
And it
exactly.
was like a magic trick. Do you remember like
Yeah,
when projection mapping first hit the scene, people were like, what the
mm,
fuck is
yeah. I also wrote my first like a 3D projection mapping kind of simple tool in Director at that time, and I had some cubes like built from wood. I had stacked them on the floor, and I was projection mapping all the surfaces of those cubes from multiple sides, and didn't really have a serious application for it. I just had this idea that video should come off the wall and into the space and onto objects and so on. And then I was in contact at that time with Joanny Lemercier from Anti-VJ. He wrote
that?
me about like, oh yeah, I'm into this stuff too. Can I use your software? And I was like, well, I wish, but it's a pile of crap. I'm the only one who can still operate it. And then a short time later, Anti-VJ basically defined all the projection mapping techniques that everyone is still using today, on the buildings. Like the building is crumbling, you see the wireframe of the building, virtual light is flying around it, and all those things that are still the basis of many projection mappings today. They came up with that stuff within like 1 year or 2 years or something like that. And I
Well, I think once
myself,
the idea took hold, once that idea took hold, it
yeah,
just took somebody to put the pieces together.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's cool that you programmed your own environments and you were
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. You're a
I was super
programmer.
early, but I had no application. So I was all the time more interested in creating the tools. But I didn't think of mapping the whole house. I was just more interested in objects and stuff like that. And also for
Yeah,
me, it was always interesting because I studied interactive art and interaction design, that it be with sensors that I can interact with the projection mapping. For me, it wasn't only about having a time-based projection map video thing running, but I wanted to interact with those surfaces. That was the direction that I was interested in.
yeah. So you've been coding and building your own tools from the beginning.
Well, I tried. So I studied that in art school and I learned coding, different languages, and also microprocessors and so on. But super early on, I realized that my talent is extremely limited in coding. So already in art school, I hired my best colleague there to kind of start coding for me. And that's basically how I started Whitevoid and what I'm doing today. that I realized that I'm really good in having the ideas and kind of project managing the whole thing and giving the creative input, but I'm not good in execution side of things. So I hired people for doing the coding, doing the 3D, doing all that stuff. And I'm basically more like a director in the sense of a movie director.
Well, I think that it takes both parts, right? I think that there are different levels that you can look at a problem from, and
Right.
you really need somebody to look at a problem from a high level and a
Yeah.
top-down level,
Yeah.
and then you need people who can put their nose into the weeds to tackle specific
Exactly.
problems. I'm very
Yeah.
much like
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah.
It's a matter of putting the right pieces together, and I love
Yeah.
that. Like I love talking to people, and I love
Yeah.
getting to know people's superpowers.
Yeah.
So it's almost
Right.
like
Right. Yeah.
finding the right people to put into these projects
Yeah.
is in the
What
end
did
what makes them come together.
what did you start out with? What was your first like coding environment or coding language, programming language?
I was really JavaScript,
Java. Yeah. Okay.
but
Yeah.
again, I'm more of a hardware person. I'm more of
Yeah.
an electrical engineer by
Mm.
trade, and
Yeah.
I a lot of it is self-taught, but I'm also a designer, like a visual
Mm.
designer. So I went to school for the visual arts, and then I moved into show production. And here in the United States, there's a school that that offers a degree in show production. And
Oh,
when I
really?
graduated with a
That's
degree in
cool.
visual arts, I
Yeah.
ended up working retail. Right? It was like a shitty job, and at the same time, I was obsessed with visual design and new media arts. So like, I'm
Yeah.
going to go back to school and figure out how to make a living doing this, and that's how I ended up going to school for show production. And after that, I toured. I toured for 7 years
Wow.
as a visual designer and a lighting designer.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, my company started when I moved to the Bay Area, and I'd broken my ankle on tour, and
uh.
they kicked me off the tour. It was a very traumatic experience, because I like
Uh,
lost my career.
uh,
Um, but at the same time, I was becoming more obsessed with taking those tools and applying them to architecture, because stages are very boring. Like the stage is a very boring square place. It's made out of
mm.
the same pieces every time. And
Yeah. At least it was. At least it was. I think it's breaking up a little bit lately.
I think you're right, because I think
Yeah.
that there are more people who are bringing new creative ideas to the
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
right, and applying like new shapes and new patterns. But for the longest time, it was based on truss, sticks of
Correct.
truss, which is just
Yeah.
different forms of square.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's basically how I ended up here. But I've always had a real passion for new media arts and the people. That's always been my community. So it's conversations with people like you, and just peers.
Yeah.
It makes you feel less alone, because like it can be
Yeah.
very isolating. Like you're doing all these new things, no one really knows like what it is that you do. They see the work, but it's like it can be very isolating.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I had
you know
that what I said before when I came to art school that I met all the other freaks. That was like a revelation to me, because before I was this kind of strange kid, I had this interest always was tinkering around with lights and doing art stuff and so on, but from a very small village. So you're basically the only one, or maybe in school you meet one other kid or something like that. But then when I finally came to art school, like it totally made sense to me because they were all like me, or even worse, or even worse is better, like even more out there or more like yeah, even more talented, some of them. And that was really for me like fantastic because I could relate to all those people and found a like-minded group. While when you're in school, the group is like, okay, you're with the punks or the poppers or the electro kids or whatever, but
right.
that's the none. I didn't fit any of those groups. So
Yeah, me
later in
neither.
art school, I was like, okay, I'm like an art group guy, and that was
Yeah.
really interesting to see that there's others like me interested in the same kind of stuff.
So how did you meet your business partner? And is he still your business partner? I read in
No,
this article that you met somebody in college. You guys started Whitevoid together.
yeah, hmm
Did that continue, or
no. He even invented the name Whitevoid. We were basically just study colleagues. We met during study, and we were also hanging out afterwards, made projects together, built some VR stuff together, and so on. We were like just interested in that. And the funny thing was, we both started in the same semester in art school in the digital class, but there were no computers, which was ridiculous. You know, we were supposed to learn coding and I don't know, Photoshop and all that stuff, but the school had no computers because they just started out this new department. And before they had this like super old stuff like the Silicon Graphics workstations, you know, the Onyx and
Sure.
this kind of really hardcore stuff. And they wanted to change over to like a modern equipment, like, you know, like this blue G3 Max or these plastic ones, or the iMac was
Right.
at that, but they hadn't gotten them. So for the whole semester, we wouldn't have any computer hardware. So we were like,
So what did
okay,
you
I mean,
do?
yeah, exactly. We all called the parents and we were like, hey, we need computers, send money or something. So each of us
That's
got as
hilarious.
much as the parents could spend, and we went together to a shop, got a discount because bought like, I don't know, 6 of those Macs and monitors. We bought on the flea market monitors and stuff like that. And we found a super cheap space that we could renovate ourselves, and the rent was super low because we did the renovation. And that's how we started to work together and have a space together, and kind of like a studio where we would experiment and we would sublet to other guys, some architects, and hang out together there. And that's how basically it naturally developed into a studio where we did jobs together. But then
Wow,
at
man,
some
I
point,
bet you that was really motivating because in essence you had to create your own you created your own
yeah,
environment to teach yourself. And I think that
yeah,
like in the
that
end,
was funny. Yeah.
maybe if you had had computers, it wouldn't have been such a motivating factor, you know?
Exactly. That's exactly what I think. We were basically forced to do that. And later, and like funny thing is, I went to give a lecture at my old class 2 weeks ago. So I returned 21 years later. And these kids, of course, they all hang out in school the whole day because there's the 3D printer and all the stuff you need. Computers, of course, you have laptops now, but at that time there was no, the laptop wasn't really affordable, I think. So we bought all desktop computers because we needed also the video graphics cards and stuff like that.
Yeah, laptops were
So
definitely not powerful enough back
yeah,
then
not powerful, and
to do
I
most.
think we couldn't afford them. There was this first generation of this black Apple laptop that looked like a pillow, so that one was available, but we couldn't afford it, and yes, it wasn't powerful enough for 3D stuff and so on. So yeah, that was kind of the start of working together. And then we got some first jobs from one of our professors who was a designer for museum exhibitions. And he
Yeah.
wanted some interactive installations. At that time, there was no multi-touch screen or stuff like you could use for that. So we had to invent all this. We had built our own tracking with infrared cameras and stuff like that. So the professor saw that and he hired us to do a job for the Jewish Museum here in Berlin. So we thought like, oh, okay, we don't look professional enough as two students, so we wanted to pretend we're an agency. So we were looking for a name, and my colleague was like, what are we working with? You know, a writer starts with a blank page, with a white blank paper. And we were like, okay, we don't even have paper, you know, we start with absolutely nothing. So we're okay, that's white nothing. So we came up with Whitevoid or he came up with the name Whitevoid for
I mean,
the
it's a great
agency.
name.
And we just called ourselves that, made a website and so on. So we started together. And we also moved to 2 more places together before we split up, because he married a girl also from art school who was studying with us, and she was interested in more graphics design and book design and so on. So they kind of started their own small office together. But we're still very good friends today, and we meet up and yeah. But we discontinued I went more in the direction of spatial design and interactive stuff and so on, and he moved in the direction of video more. We both studied video and creative coding in art school, and he then went more in the video direction. I went more to the coding. So he's doing grading for movies today and stuff like that. He's working with my brother, actually, who was a movie maker.
Oh wow, it's a
Yeah,
small world. You
yeah,
know, it's funny when like when two people have a vision. You know, I started DA by myself, and then
yeah,
a business partner joined, and then that business partner left. But it's almost like, you know, it's almost like this thing that you just have to push up the hill, and it's like you
mm,
have this. It's almost like a this like it's an impulse that you just have to express yourself in this certain way,
yeah,
and sometimes it's yeah, sometimes people join the mission, and they help you push the ball up the hill, and sometimes it's just you. um
yeah.
so when he left, like when he left, did you have other people on the team, or did you just go back to being you for a while?
Yeah, at that moment I was very, how to say, yeah, destroyed or desperate or something. So yeah, I still also continued to work with him for a while, but I was, for a moment, I think I was alone. So I was always used to have multiple people share a space. Then for a moment I was alone, so I rented another space um, to have the office there, which was an apartment actually above a doner kebab shop. So it smelled
Uh-huh.
all day long like kebabs. And I had two rooms, and I felt so stupid because I was like, well, why do I have two rooms? I'm alone, you know? So I locked the door to the second room, and I was sitting there kind of alone and did my projects and hired freelancers and friends for doing the stuff. And then at some point a guy wrote me like, hey, can I intern for you? And I was like, intern? Well, I don't even have any employees, you know what should I do with an intern? And he was very persistent about it. I was like, hey, I have no money, and it's not a company, I'm alone. And the guy was like, well, I don't care, I'm coming, you know. So he came, and then he was sitting opposite of me, and then I had my first intern and then a second one. And for a while I worked a lot with interns. They stayed between 2 months, or some of them they prolonged, and after the studies was finished stayed a year or two. And then it naturally developed at some point I hired the first guy permanently,
Yeah,
while I was still a one person, kind of not really a registered company. And then at some point, I registered the company actually very late. Before it was just a person business, or I don't know how to translate it in English. But
yeah, no, 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 just a single person doing a thing.
yeah,
So I'm curious, your when your thing split off into Whitevoid and Kinetic Lights, because they're very much part of, like, when I look at the work that you do, it's very much based around that kinetics, but it
yeah,
makes a lot of sense to separate the hardware um, from like the design portion.
yeah. I mean, that was also a thought that I had at some point, that I should split it off to also encourage other agencies or other designers to use the hardware, because I had started to develop this motor systems, you know, the winches and light elements and so on. So I used them for my own stuff and for my own interests, of course, but I wanted to professionalize it into a serious product. And that's why I split off Kinetic Lights as a brand. Basically, it's still the same company actually in the background, but I split it off to encourage others. Now we're actually kind of we have these different brands, but we are kind of communicating openly that it's all the same kind of, because we also realized a lot of clients of Kinetic Lights were also interested in having a show created by Whitevoid or by myself. So
Oh,
in
of
the end,
course.
we always ended up doing it all together anyways. So we have these different websites and so on, but lately we also started to cross communicate that we're actually connected to the sister companies, and we have kind of the employees, and some of them are shared, but some of them also separate. Like Dark Matter now, the exhibition space, there's different employees than at White Void, for example. But Kinetic
Yeah,
Lights and White Void, they're pretty much sharing the employees, because I mean, the engineers more belong to Kinetic Lights, but sometimes White Void is also needing engineering for custom developments, and then there's the same engineers doing that. So it's more to the outside than to the inside, those splits.
well, it's cool to it's cool to hear about how your team has grown. You know, we're also in a period where we're growing fast right now. It's really exciting because there's a lot more energy and a lot more ideas
Yeah,
involved in the company. And we also have one foot in hardware and one foot in software. It's kind of a difficult bridge to straddle, or like
Yeah,
a you've got these two pieces which are kind of disparate, but they feed into the same end products, right?
yeah,
And I've been thinking a lot about like maybe it makes more sense to split the hardware apart from the software, but in the end, it all goes into the same projects.
yeah,
So for right
yeah, and
now, we bill ourselves as a design studio, and we
mm,
focus on the design that also does engineering. And sometimes people come to us and they're like, oh, hey, we've got this project and we need somebody to figure out how to make it work. And they already have
yeah,
the idea. And then sometimes people come to us and they just want the idea, and then they want to
yeah.
develop it themselves.
Yeah, it's the
um,
same thing. Like we're also like selling or renting our winches to dry hire to third parties now. So it's
yeah.
more and more that someone else is even installing it and then they have their own programming and so on. So we are more than only involved on the technical side. And then there are also requests that are the total opposite, where they're like, no, no, we don't care what you're using. We want your art piece. And then they specifically request one of our art pieces, which of course is totally made of Kinetic Lights parts, our hardware, but they don't care about that. So we also sell it as one art piece, and not like it's 150 motors plus 120 LED lights and so on. So it's
Cool.
also kind of wrapped differently. So we are kind of in so many kind of different models that sometimes we're also getting a bit lost. What's actually the core of what we're doing? I don't think there is any core. It's more like a swarm of things that we're actually working on.
Well, that's actually it's a good point to hit on, because
Mm,
sometimes I also feel like what encapsulates what we do, and
yeah,
it's a lot of different things. And it is kind of like this collection of ideas that come together to produce these visual installations. Um, but from the outside, right, from my perspective, you guys seem very like installation based. You do all of these installations at like Craftwork and the
no,
Atonal Festival.
yeah,
You guys seem like you have one foot firmly in the fine arts. And wondering like
definitely.
how
Yeah.
is kind of like a driving force behind your company, or like one is that one of the main outlets that you see for your work?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely one of my personal interests to create art. I mean, I have two talents. I'm always saying, one is having ideas, an abundance of ideas, like ideas for many lifetimes, basically, and the other one is like I can tell good stuff from bad stuff, like gold from shit. I know what's good and
Yeah.
what's bad, and that these are my only two talents, basically. And so I have a lot of ideas, so I need output. And if I'm always waiting for a client request where one of my ideas maybe might fit, sometimes I'm waiting forever to kind of apply something where I think it's a great idea, but how can you sell to a client like, hey, I have this idea, I want to fly mirrors and then I will bounce lights off and this will be a great emotional experience. And they would be like, I don't know, can you, how does that work? And they're skeptical, So I have all these
You
great
got to
sketches
show
and
them.
stuff, but where's the
You have
outlet?
to
So at
show
some
them.
point, yeah, exactly. So at some point, I decided to just create stuff myself and see if anyone would be interested. And that kind of was
That's really
feeding back into more concrete assignments from clients.
So how do you fund those concept pieces, or like how do you make those a reality? Inevitably, we'll take paying projects and we'll use the profit from those paying projects
Yeah,
to fund kind of more abstract conceptual work
exactly.
that we do.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that kind of how it works for you guys? Because
Yes.
Scalar was actually the first piece that I saw
Uh-huh.
um, of yours in Berlin when I was visiting, and
Yeah,
well, I just love how it is an art piece for art's sake. It is
yeah.
not like, it is not like Nike presents Scalar. It's like, no,
No,
this is a visual performance um, created by Whitevoid, and
yeah.
it's meant for public consumption. You sell tickets, and
Hmm.
it's a brilliant piece. And what struck me from the beginning was how, in much of Europe, you can have these visual performances that stand on their own. Like you can have a
mm,
light festival where the lighting is the main draw. It's not like a music festival with some lighting attached. It's like
uh,
there's a lighting performance with some music attached, and
mm,
that's a very unique concept. It doesn't really exist that much here in the United States.
uh. Yeah, I was always interested in lifting the visual side on the same level as, for example, in the clubs, the DJ. And there was a moment in Berlin in time where the VJ was promoted on the flyer or on the advertisement as much as the DJ.
I'm
For a
saying here in
short,
the
brief
United States,
moment, 5 years
it was
maybe, it was super important. And we went to go to some shows because of the VJ and not because of the DJ who was playing. But that kind of disappeared rather quickly. And the VJ again was the background. They did great art, but no one really cares. And that's also still the way it is in many clubs today. If you go to any of the big clubs in Vegas or so on, they all have a VJ, but no one cares about him. There's like Steve Aoki is the man of the night and stuff like that. So I really
well, I
didn't
think
like that. I thought it should be more on the same level, because what are you looking at today? If you're looking at a big DJ playing, it's a fantastic light show mostly, and then there's this little guy hopping up and down and pretending to kind of mix the tracks. Some of them might do, but the visual side is becoming so big and so important that I thought, why not, I mean, put them on eye level? And that's what I'm doing with my shows. I'm asking great musicians like Robert Henke from Ableton, Monolake, Kinetic Rain, and so on, and we do a collaboration. It's an eye to eye level kind of joint development, and we also present it as such. And that's basically my aim, and I think it already also happening in the bigger scheme. Like A-listers are starting to at least name the guys who did their visuals, or specifically hire someone who has a name on its own for doing visual art. So I think this development it's slow, but I think it's getting there. That at some point the two names might be on the same level.
Well, that's the eternal struggle. From
Yeah,
when I was VJing, it was always like we're performing, the DJ's performing, what gives? Like, why are we not on this
yeah,
flyer? I remember that.
exactly.
And there are
Yeah,
still people who are fighting that battle today. And it's like, no, I don't
yeah,
know if like a VJ is, yeah, I don't know if that's the right context or venue to fight that battle. I think that the way that you're creating unique art, right? And then working with musicians like Robert Hinke,
yeah,
who's brilliant,
yeah.
and other collaborators too. Michael Solinger.
Solinger, he produces lasers. It's a laser
No, I
company from
know.
Berlin.
I met
Yeah,
him when I was in
yeah.
Berlin. I met him, and we talked about Deep Web, and that was
Hmm.
the installation that he was part of.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea of collaboration outside of like the typical structure of a
Mm.
concert or a DJ set, where
No.
you're creating a whole new kind of performance and bringing in collaborators, and then there is no structure that you're fighting against, right?
Mm.
It's not like a DJ set where there's everybody is expecting the DJ to be the superstar, to be the
Yeah.
headliner, and then
Yeah.
you have these other things around it. It's like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
creating a whole new experience that
Yeah.
that takes a whole different form, and
Yeah.
then you can bring in collaborators and you can be on even footing.
Yeah. I
um,
mean, it's partly already also happening with A-listers. I mean, for example, Beyonce had one or two of her tours designed by S. Devlin, and that was publicly communicated that this is a piece by S. Devlin, performed then by Beyonce in her show. So I think it's in some points it's already happening. Or Kanye West is talking about the designer from, what label is he working with? Forgot. Clothing label. Like the one designer from that label is also his stage designer, and this is a kind of, or they create NFTs together now, where a visual guy and the musician is kind of creating an NFT together, stuff like
so
that. So
to a certain extent,
it's
that
happening in
has
some areas.
that has been the paradigm for a while, like on real big A-list tours, at least for visual designers like me. The
Mm.
the stage designers were always kind of like part of the band and the superstars. My
Yeah,
like a mentor of mine was I toured with Tool for a while,
yeah,
and a mentor of mine was Breckenridge Haggerty, the designer for the visuals. Now Adam, the bassist, was very interested in the visual arts, but in the end, it was these visual designers, these artists who were creating the
yeah.
looks and the stage show, and that that really influenced me. And whenever I go see a band, I personally am always looking at the visual design, very
Yeah, of
interested in like
course.
who are these people, who did this visual design, because
Yeah,
that is that's the art that speaks to me more so than the music. It's
yeah,
the visual design and the stage
yeah.
design. But I think that's not that's not the norm.
No,
That's
no.
not why like
But more,
90% of
more,
people are going to shows.
more and more artists understand it. Like we were touring with Bon Iver, and he was has a works with a lighting designer, Michael Brown, who's also a really good and long-term friend of his, and he's very open to give away a lot of control to the lighting designer. He's almost not talking into or giving him directions or anything because he knows he will make him shine in the end, you know. So we had a lot
Yeah,
of freedom of creating around his songs, of course. Of course, the center is the band and the singer, but we are very free to create something that makes them look even better. And there was a lot of creative freedom, while in other environments, it's like completely already, like predefined, and you don't have much wiggle room to kind of bring in your own creativity. And they were also very open to communicate that in an advertisement video, for example, for the tour. So they were showing our designs in the small video before and talked about who they work with and so on. So I found that a really nice, very open way of collaboration. Of course, the musician is still the headline of this, but he gives a lot of credit to the visualist.
absolutely. And I mean, it's when you have that kind of collaboration, then that's what creates the most impactful stage shows.
Yeah, exactly.
If you look at some of the most amazing stage shows that have happened,
Yeah,
they're always a collaboration. And I,
yeah.
I think generally the musician, the artists, if they're cool, are more than happy to share that credit. Um, are you guys doing a lot of stage production these days? Like, is that something that you guys are doing?
Yeah, we were on a lot of those, but then all these worldwide tours were canceled,
Of
and
course,
yeah, not much came back up. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff in the talking and making, but yeah, for now, all these worldwide tours are canceled because the regulations in the different countries are too difficult to handle. They're
of
not
course,
sure if they can make the jump, and if they have to cancel tour stops, it gets very expensive really fast. So a lot of these big tours have been canceled where we were a part of. We were also supposed to be part of the Olympic opening now in Beijing, and that was canceled. And they did a completely different show actually now in the end than they
wow,
originally were planning. It was supposed to be like a really like super high visibility, pushing the envelope, crazy thing showing off. And now they created this rather toned down show, yeah, because the situation changed and so on. So we
that's
were
really
involved in a lot
frustrating.
of stuff, but at the moment, yeah, requests are coming, but everything is kind of like with the brake on, not really knowing if that will take off again or not.
That's interesting because I've the pandemic. We've always focused on permanent architectural pieces, so
Mm.
that's our focus is
Well,
architectural
that's a good
placement.
idea in Corona because they have longer lead times, right? So you had probably still stuff to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, it things got canceled, but things came back quickly, and now
Yeah,
things are busier than they've ever been.
that's great.
And well, I'm curious, like what kinds of how is Whitevoid and Kinetic Lights? How like what is your bread and butter? How do you guys support your operation? Like,
Mm.
what's the normal job for you guys, or do you have one?
Not really. I mean, it's a completely mix of stuff. So we do a lot of rentals. So we have a huge warehouse full of our materials, different winch types, different light types, different standard show designs that we have that we can tour immediately for anything from car launches to, I don't know, conferences, the trade fair stands, stuff like that. So we rent them out for short term,
Yeah.
mostly maximum a week. Um, and then another business model is, of course, we are selling our machines and the light elements and so on. So we do large scale permanent installations, like we did the Hakkasan Club in Las Vegas, for example. The whole
Oh, wait a minute.
ceiling
Wait,
is
wait,
a
wait, wait, wait. Hold on. You did
Hakkasan.
Hakkasan?
Yeah, Hakkasan,
Did
the new
did
ceiling, the
you work with
kinetic ceiling.
did you work with LEDs control?
Let's control.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Rebecca
don't know.
Sanchez.
Oh, yeah, I know her. She's a good friend of mine,
Yeah,
but
man.
not on this
She's a
project.
good.
She did the other club there, not the Hakkasan. It's another club, Souk Club. She did.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was Souk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
she's a good friend of mine, man. And
Oh, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy. Like Vegas is a really good source of projects for like a lot of our
Definitely.
community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. Yeah, yeah. So there we did this whole the whole kinetic ceiling they play every night. And that's also, for example, one thing that I'm really proud about. They advertise it always along the DJ. So it says like, I don't know, Steve Aoki or Tiesto playing under the Hakkasan grid. And the Hakkasan grid is what we created, this grid we call it. We called it the grid. So, and also the grid has a solo before the main DJ comes. We play our 3 minute intro show every night. So it's our intro
Uh,
show, then everyone's filming that, and then the light turns on, and then there's the main act DJ. So our light installation has a solo also during every night, and
that's really cool.
the lighting designers there and the video guys are really proud to perform it. So we gave them a lot of tools so they can create their own patterns and really integrate it into the rest of the lighting and the show design they're modifying every night. So that was a very good project. And another big one we did was this PY1 pyramid. I don't know if you have heard of it, of the former owner of Cirque du Soleil, Guy Liberté. He created this pyramid shaped venue in Montreal, and then he wanted to tour it. It's called PY1. So we were also involved in all the kinetics in that massive pyramid thing. We created special winch system for that.
Yeah, I'm looking
And
at it
then,
now. And
yeah,
beautiful.
currently we are working on the ABBA, the permanent residency of ABBA in London. So we do the whole kinetic ceiling for that. Is huge. So yeah,
Very, very cool.
these are the permanent project things that we're working on, and then we do a lot of design concepts. So we do designs for clubs, for example, some private clubs also, and then the third thing is our own art show. The fourth element is our own art shows that we also tour or rent for light festivals or all kinds of occasions wherever it works, or we tour them ourselves sometimes. And then we have
Interesting.
dark matter, of course. Now this is our own permanent space in Berlin where we show 7 of our pieces permanently.
Yeah, I think the concept of an experience space is really like it's really coming of age. You know, there's a
Yeah,
number of experiential
it's funny
spaces that
how it's popping up. I mean, we're working on it already for 5 years or longer. I had the idea, but now it's becoming really a thing with like Team Lab starting it off, I guess,
well,
with
that's a
those
good thing because what that
projection
does is
mapped 360 things that's now like all over the place. It's crazy.
yeah, but it's also making it acceptable, and people are open to the
Totally.
idea of funding these types of
Yeah,
spaces. So I think that
totally.
in a way, it's yeah, there's a lot of the industry that's opening up right now because some of these high profile installations are showing developers and people who are funding these projects that it's a viable source of revenue,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's yeah, it's really interesting.
But it's of
So what
course
is
also watering them down a lot. Yeah, it's a lot that people are like, oh, I saw this kind of experience already, but it's totally different what kind of content you're presenting in it and in what way you're telling the story and so on. So of course you have to compete with like lower level kind of yeah parts
Yeah, and
of this kind of
there has been a number of art spaces like that in San Francisco that have
uh,
come and gone where they're like,
uh,
okay, well, you, you know what they're trying to do, but it just doesn't quite get
yeah.
there.
And a lot of them are also mixed up with those Instagram museums, where people just go to take a nice
Oh
picture
my
or
god.
record their TikTok or something. So sometimes people
Yeah.
also mix our space up with that. And we get requests from influencers if they can shoot their stuff there, and they see it more than as a background for their own creation. But I see it as
Uh,
these are art pieces on their own, so they will not
do
stand
you
in
let them? Do you
as
let
a
them come
background.
and do you let them come
No,
and
no,
do their
no, of course not. No, no, no. I mean, they can come as a
thing?
visitor and talk about it when they're there or take the selfie or whatever, but we're not really actively supporting it much. I mean,
No, of
I don't
course
have a
not. That
problem with this culture, and it's okay, but I wouldn't like close down the venue to help them shoot
oh,
something
definitely,
or
definitely,
yeah,
definitely not.
yeah,
Definitely not. Yeah, I was talking to Moment Factory and those guys around the liminal spaces that they've created out in out in the forest. I can't
yeah.
remember what
This
they're
is a
called.
great. These are great concepts. Yeah. Oh, great
It is,
projects.
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those guys are true artists as well. I really
Oh yeah,
respect their work. I respect what
yeah.
they do. Uh, do you have a lot of collaboration with other people in the industry? You got stick to your own group, or do you reach out and collaborate
Mm,
with others?
no, we're very open for requests, basically. So I mean, from the very beginning, I profit from the interconnectivity of the internet because I'm always saying I studied visual arts because I don't want to talk, I want to
Yeah,
let my art speak and the visual speak. So I'm not a good seller. I'm not like actively approaching anyone or something. I'm more like showing my stuff and then hoping that like a trying to catch a fish, that someone would bite and kind of ask me for more. And that's still how it's kind of working today. So we're not very actively in kind of going out to kind of make connections or things like that, but a lot of people connect with us, and from that sometimes collaborations arise a lot with production companies, who have, I don't know, they have a job for I don't know, producing the opening of Mercedes S-Class in Shanghai or something, and they call us like, "Hey, you want to put your art piece into our show and stuff like that." So
yeah.
that's the way how collaborations happen. But we're not like reaching out to anyone like, "Hey guys, you would really like to collaborate on that piece or something like that." Not so much. Apart from, of course, with musicians, that's where I'm more proactive because yeah, they're a big part of my shows. So I'm actively approaching musicians or composers that I personally like, or I'm a fanboy of, and then hopefully manage to convince them to collaborate with me. So in that sense, I'm collaborating with others.
Are you collaborating with anybody right now? Any musicians?
I'm in the process of scouting. Basically, I'm talking to some different ones, and I have some guys I would love to work with, and I'm looking if I can, yeah, convince one of them.
Yeah, I mean, your work speaks for itself, man. I'm sure most people are open to talking, and most people are open, at least in principle, to collaborating with other artists.
Yeah,
Especially if those artists are doing brilliant work.
yeah,
It's I found it's fairly easy to
yeah,
to reach out if the effort is low to to do collaborations and to
yeah.
at least have conversations.
Yeah, it's always a balance. I mean, if the person you approach is too high profile, often they would love to do something, but I'm already
They don't
booked for
have
the
time.
next 2 years or something like that, and I'm like, okay, forget it. Or they're on something else, and they're all like also creative minds. So of course they're also creating their own projects all the time. So sometimes that's a problem to find someone who is talented enough to kind of do the collaboration on the right level, but has still enough time to do so, and is
Sure.
approachable for such a project. And that's always kind of the balance act you have to juggle.
Yeah, of course. Are you working on anything in particular that you can talk about right now that you're
I want
excited
to
about?
create another big show. I mean, I'm into big shows, and I haven't done anything in, I don't know, 3 years. No big show, because I was working on Dark Matter. There's a lot of small shows there that I also had to create, and some of them to recreate. So there was a lot of work in it. But I want to create another bigger piece involving kinetic technology, but also other stuff. So yeah, I'm currently kind of scoping for opportunity, where to show it, who to work with, when, and so on.
I'm really fascinated with volumetrics, and that's really the area that I'm passionate about.
Yeah,
Where we have the opportunity to do a massive volumetric hanging light piece.
nice,
It would be the largest hanging light sculpture in North America, and
cool.
I'm just thinking about content, how to drive it, like
Yeah,
how to structure the pendants that make up the the canvas. In the end, what both of us do, what all visual sculptural light artists are doing, we're creating canvases. They're
yeah,
unique canvases, and then like for Souk or for the club in Vegas that you did, it's you've created a canvas. It's a moving canvas, and then you
right.
let people
Yeah,
paint on it,
yeah,
and
true.
it's
Yeah, it's like an instrument. Like I'm always saying, we are creating an instrument, a visual instrument, and then we or someone else has to learn how to play it. What do you do with kinetic mirrors and lights bouncing off, and what patterns do look good, and how do you arrange them, and what colors are working and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm on the site always, like on your website. Yeah, these volumetric displays especially. I mean, what kind of patterns do you create? What speed should they move through space at, and what kind of ambience do you want to, like, get the people into that are kind of looking at it or passing by or standing below it?
well, you talk a lot about about narrative in your
Mm,
work, and I think
yeah.
narrative is a core part of all art, or
Mm,
it should be. And for
yeah.
us, the narrative is emotional. It
Yeah.
really is creating an atmosphere and a vibe, and I think that's why our work has fit so well with architecture, because
Mm,
in architecture, in placemaking, you're really just setting a vibe,
yeah.
and
Totally.
you're like creating an atmosphere that affects people's emotions when they're in the
Yeah.
space. And so the content that we create is very, it's algorithmic.
Mm,
It's generative. It's math.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful math that expresses on these canvases. But in the end, it's an emotional message,
Yeah.
and that's the type of content that you know I find most beautiful anyway. It's this non-contextual messaging. doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't really work very well for advertising, but it's for as an art as art. It's that's the type of art that really resonates with me. And the art that you guys create is also very algorithmic. It's beautiful math. It's math in motion.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it could work with advertisement actually, if people would be more open to use it that way. So we
it
are
can.
we yeah, we one of the projects we did was for the car company Hyundai. We did a kind of volumetric, like a point cloud that we activated with lasers from the outside,
Yeah.
and was kind of about communicating their design principles, which are, of course, surfaces shaped by the wind, waves, whatever car companies are using to kind of describe the surface of the car shapes. And there was also
Yeah.
this discussion, like, okay, and then uh, I was like, okay, do we need to show a car? Is that really necessary? Because we want to talk about your design language, not about the car, but about the abstract thing, the design language. So first
Yeah.
they were like, yeah, of course we need a car and so on. And then I convinced them to not show the car, but kind of charge people with the emotion of the shape of a car, but not by showing a car. And also
Yeah.
then the next thing was like, yeah, where to put the logo. I was like, why do you want to put the logo? When the people leave, give them a little booklet where you explain the what this was about, and where you can make the link to your car or something like that. And first they
So
were also not convinced by it.
was this for a physical installation, like a trade show, or was this like a commercial or a TV commercial?
It was no, it was a physical installation, but in for the art week, and what was it called, the Milan, is it called Milan Art Week? No, the Milan Design Week, I think, where
Yep. Yeah. I know it.
brands show themselves in a kind of different light. So it's not about showing the car, it's about showing that you are related to high-end design and that you want to inspire people who care about this kind of qualities. So it's not about showing the car, but it's showing the brand and giving the people an idea about what the brand stands for. And so it was more like an art experience to represent the brand. And in the end,
Yeah.
it worked super well. We didn't have the car and we didn't have the logo, and people were kind of curious about what is it and got inspired and so on. Then in the end, it was revealed that this is by Hyundai. So that
Well, there's
worked really
something to be
well. So
said
it's advertisement, but not really advertisement. You know, we were enhancing the image that people have of this brand, but by not showing the product, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that you're fortunate to have been able to work with a brand that was open to that concept. And I think
Yeah.
also from an advertising perspective, there's something to be said for mystery, right? And
Mm.
like a grand reveal because it captures people's imagination. I think when people are beaten over the head with a logo
Yeah.
and a blatant buy this product message, people
Yeah.
tune it out. I think that
Totally.
especially in our generation,
Yeah.
this day and age now, people are just so sick of advertising.
Totally.
They are.
I mean, you can see it with the whole TikTok generation and how advertisement works there. You have to be funny, you have to be creative, you shouldn't be too glossy, you should be real. It's a totally different way of how products are presented, adapted to how these kids are thinking today. I think that's fascinating. Not much interested in it because I'm not interested in creating content that way. But it's
No,
interesting
me
to
neither.
see how brands are adapting to that instead of like before when we had to adapt to how the brands wanted to present, advertise. They were forcing it down our throats because we couldn't escape it because it was in the middle of our movie that we wanted to watch or stuff like that, where
Right.
advertisement was pushed at you when you couldn't escape it. Now it's the total opposite. They have to be funny and interesting and everything to catch the attention of the young people. If they just are
Absolutely.
glossy and perfect and the kid is like not even seeing that while they're swiping. That's how when I'm on the phone, I don't see any ads. It's full of it, but I'm blending them perfectly out. If you ask me
Yeah, well
after one
that
day,
and ad
what
blockers.
ads did you see? It's like an ad blocker in my head. I don't see any of those. But on TikTok, they're making them so engaging that you watch them because they're funny or clever, or they're like, oh, Gucci is doing a good job here with these two grandmas wearing their newest coats. Like it's clever, and you admire Gucci for being so open and so on.
Well, that's the evolution of advertising. I think that
Yeah.
advertising has to evolve with culture, and culture has definitely, man, culture is so quickly evolving now, man. It's
Yeah.
really crazy to
Yeah.
see where the world is with like the rapid evolution of communication. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And all of this like QAnon, Trump, like it's kind of like the collective consciousness of humanity has gone off the rails. And we're like
Yeah.
observing this really weird evolution in uh, communication and the mentality of the masses, right?
Mm.
In these two like crazy ways.
Yeah.
What will come out of that? It's
Uh,
like we were
you,
discussing how. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it's almost like we're waiting for the big reset, because everyone's
Yeah,
like, "Oh, where's this going? This is not right. Everything is strange. Can we kind of like, like make a cut and kind of make a new order and start fresh or something like that?" I think it almost feels like that to everyone.
yeah. Of course, it doesn't work like that. It's like things will continue to evolve, and they
Totally.
will evolve like over time and
Uh,
organically. But things are just evolving and changing so fast. It's really
uh,
crazy.
I mean,
It makes me wonder what is the next
yeah.
cultural paradigm. Like how the rave culture was kind of like a cultural paradigm that
Mm,
changed the way people thought about music and art.
yeah.
So was jazz, so was
Mm,
Burning Man. Burning
yeah.
Man
True.
was represented like an evolution in paradigm. It's like what's the next wave?
Yeah. I mean, a lot is from gaming now, I guess, the gamification of everything and this metaverse that everyone is talking about. And the funny thing is, I just wanted to say, I read an article from someone who was like, hey, we're waiting for this virtual reality being good enough to really want to live in for so many years. I mean, I studied in Chicago in 2001 in the virtual reality class, kind of where they were already meditating about where this would go, but the resolution was shit and the glasses were lagging and all this kind of stuff. And now it's here. And this guy was writing, well, but now I'm actually not interested in it anymore. I kind of get where it's going. And I actually think we don't need this. But I'm aware that the kids will do it anyhow,
Oh
because
yeah.
they can and they want to push the envelope and they want to go further and so on. But he was like, I don't think it all makes any sense anymore, and it will not really bring humanity further in an important way. It will just be done because it can be done. But why do I want to, or why should I live in virtual reality? And I actually had the same thinking, because when I was young, I was always saying, yeah, and when I'm old, I will live in virtual reality and it will be great, and kind of like following the Matrix idea and so on. But now I'm like, I prefer to go to the forest, like instead of walking in a simulation of a forest with a perfect sunset and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but
I think that
it's probably
it
an
will
age
happen.
thing also.
No, I think it'll happen, but I also think it's age coupled with desensitization to digital. Like
Mm,
we basically do live in a simulation for most of our lives. Like it doesn't matter that it's not strapped to our face. We
yeah,
stare at a screen or a
true.
little screen for most of our day. And I
Yeah.
think that like we already know where that road leads. And that's fine. Like virtual will always be part of our experience.
Mm,
It's becoming more and more a part of like how humans experience life. But I think that true balance comes through the appreciation of the physical and the real and nature. And like I'm
mm.
the same way, man. Like, you can see my climbing shoes behind me. Like I'm
Yeah,
obsessed
yeah,
with
true.
with climbing and going outdoors, outdoor
Yeah,
sports, and it's
yeah,
it's what keeps me sane. And there's no virtual experience that can replace that. That is a physical experience living in a physical
yeah.
world.
Well, not yet, I guess. I mean, that's the thing. When this conversion is happening between that simulation will become indistinctively. How do you say in English?
Indistinguishable, but I think that's a
And
long way.
indistinguishable from the real world, then all of this will work. Like the guy in the Matrix, when he eats the steak and he says like, "Hey, as long as it's juicy and tasty in my mouth and I don't feel the difference, that it's not a real
Yeah.
steak, I'm happy." So I think in that moment when virtual reality becomes like that, then there's no discussion about it anymore, because it doesn't matter if you're in the real forest or in a simulated forest, it will be the same experience. But
Well, then the question is, then it's like, are we even the same species? Like I think I mean, you're right, but I think that is a long way off from where
yeah,
we are almost with like
yeah,
goggles that are, really good goggles.
yeah,
And that takes care of your eyesight. Like, all right, you can
mm,
see things that look very real, but it's like life and reality is so much more than what you
yeah,
see.
yeah,
It's an amalgamation of all your senses, and
yeah.
that's a long way off.
Yeah, I almost feel sad that it takes so long, because I don't know, it was already the second wave or whatever of virtual reality, when Jaron Lanier was kind of on the forefront of those developments and had this kind of um, was musing about where this would go and so on. I was such a strong believer in the 90s. I was such a strong believer that that's near, that it would 20 years and we'll be there. And now it's more than 20 years later, and the technology is didn't make the leap wasn't as big as I thought it would do. I mean, it's already crazy what they can do in games and so on, but is still not far enough, so that will still be, I don't know, another 20, 30, 40 years maybe, until this
Are
is
you a
really
big
really
gamer?
convincing. I
Do you
was
play?
I spent a couple of years of my life only on that, and smoking weed. But it was in the 90s, so I was playing PlayStation 1 and like Nintendo and all this kind of stuff like crazy. But then, yeah, from time to time I play, but not so much anymore, because I'm not interested anymore in exploring the fantasy of someone else. I want to
Yeah.
create myself. So I
Yes.
would love to create my own game or my own environment, and experience that. But I'm not so much interested in all those quests, either shoot all those people or collect all that stuff or do this or that. In my free time, I like to kind of relax, and I like those games where these kind of walkthroughs, or actually when I play a game, I mostly just walk around and check it out. I'm not so
Yeah,
interested
yeah.
in like I was playing Cyberpunk with a friend of mine, and I was just walking around those streets and driving the car until the sun comes up and like all this kind of stuff. I like the experience, but I'm not so much into the action of it, that I need to win something or find something or compete with that
Maybe
or
maybe
those
maybe
things,
that is maybe that is the metaverse, right? And I think that it actually opens up a really interesting opportunity where it can be like maybe we create content that's not only in the physical world, but maybe your installations are mirrored virtually. And that's something that we're exploring, right? Is taking the installations that we build
Mm,
and they all exist as 3D models anyway.
yeah,
So taking those 3D models and putting them into some of these like environments that are
mm,
billing themselves as the metaverse, where
yeah,
you just we take this big light sculpture that we're building and we
yeah.
we add that into some virtual world.
Mm. Yeah, but then again, I think I always like to explore the properties of each tool or environment to the maximum. So what's possible, and with my physical installations, I'm pushing as much as I can in the physical environment in terms of size, complexity, what can I handle financially, and so on. But in the virtual environment, those possibilities are basically unlimited. That's also a big point that I'm criticizing about those. Like I always tell the same story when there was the Corona peak, and they had this Burning Man virtual reality thing. I was like, okay, that sounds weird. I'm gonna check it out, and I checked it out, and for me
It wasn't that cool.
that was the biggest fail for me that came out of this. We need to digitize now everything, and we do this XR whatever kind of simulations of real thing in virtual reality. Because I walk around there in an empty desert, no one was there. The music came
I
from
know,
somewhere far away, and then they have these huge sculptures like they have them in reality at Burning Man. But in virtual
right?
reality, it's not impressive if I have a 20-foot person standing there, because I can do that with 2 clicks. And
I
why
know.
is there still sand on the ground, and why do I have a ground at all? Because if you
Yeah,
spin the Burning Man spirit into virtual reality, uh, everything you do at Burning Man is not only about looking at those things, but you're in a different state of mind. You're taking drugs, you're hugging people, like all those things that on the human level, what Burning Man is about, that doesn't work if you just transfer the look of it one to one into virtual reality. For my taste, it should have been totally not in a desert, and there shouldn't have been gravity at all, and it should be like spinning further all those sculptures that are evoking a trip or stuff like that. Everything people build there is like looks out of a fever dream. So why not
yeah.
create the fever dream instead, and like immerse myself in the possibilities of that medium, because Burning Man is pushing the limits of what I can build in a desert and how crazy I can go, what
Well,
tools I
Burning
can
Man
bring to
put
the
itself
desert.
in the desert. They put Burning Man in the desert as a blank canvas. And it's
Exactly.
like you don't need that canvas once you enter the virtual world.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sum up of it. So I was so
Yeah.
disappointed by it, and how stupid those people can be, who are that I couldn't even understand that those are the same people, that they don't understand that the great thing they create in reality, you cannot transfer it one to one into virtual reality. You have to find the equivalent of what is the representation of that craziness in the desert in a virtual environment that's limitless, basically, and your canvas is not, whatever, but
Yeah.
it's not a flat surface of sand. But I also don't have a solution to it, what it should look like. But I was laughing my ass off because that was so wrong, felt so wrong
I
to
know.
me.
I saw it. I saw it too, and I was a
Yeah.
little bit underwhelmed. I think it's not quite there yet. So have you been to Burning Man?
No, unfortunately not. I'm just dreaming of it since, I don't know, 20 years already. I was always thinking if I should go, I should create something there. But then people said I should better go first to completely understand it before trying to create something for it. It's
I
probably a
agree
good
with that.
idea. Yeah,
I think that just going. I mean, this might be a good year, man. Like
yeah,
I've been many times, but it's in our backyard,
yeah. Of
and
course.
it's fun to create something, but it's almost like in order to create something, you need to have like that patron, somebody who's willing to fund your idea.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
now, especially, there's a lot more people who are willing to fund those ideas
Mm.
um, for the sake of art, and it is a canvas. So I could totally see you guys doing something out there.
Yeah, I like big, and what bigger can there be like an empty desert space, So you can.
Yeah.
There's no limit to size, basically. The limit is your budget, probably in the end.
Hey, so you know what's happening out there recently that really has captured my imagination? It's happening everywhere, but out on the playa, it looks really amazing. Is drone shows. The
Yeah,
idea, the concept of pixels that move. So
yeah.
it's like a volumetric installation, but instead of static pixels,
Mm.
you've got a cloud of moving pixels. That's fascinating to me, and I've
No,
always wanted to create content for that.
no. I mean, yeah, that was the obvious next step from my kinetic stuff at some point. But then I decided to stay with one technology because, yeah, I wanted to concentrate on perfecting that instead of like branching out. But yeah, drones would be really fun to work with. And there's still so many things to do. I mean, you can also use them probably in different ways than. I mean, Studio Drift, show they also did at Burning Man, they already did that. They used it as a swarm instead of just using it as this is a pixel like others did before. So there's so many more possibilities still out there, I think, to what to create with that.
Well, I see all the drone shows. Most of them are just garbage. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, of
they
course.
make a guitar in the
Headset.
air. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
ooh, it's a
exactly.
guitar in the air.
Horrible.
It's like, no, there's so much potential there, though, man.
uh,
Like of having like a display for abstract content, and not like
yeah,
making like a top hat in the sky, but like
yeah,
creating a real moving, living cloud that you can run light patterns through. That's
yeah,
fascinating to me.
yeah. I think there will come a lot of more stuff. I mean, there's more like more and more companies also who have big amounts of drones. I mean, obviously you need like 1,000 or up to do like cool stuff. So and
Oh
more
yeah,
companies have those amounts. So yeah,
yeah.
and there's good softwares already like to export your 3D animation automatically to Drone Show. So it's getting easier, I think, to do those things.
Do you guys work in an environment that you created, or do you work with existing software to drive your light patterns?
We work with, I mean, it's both. I mean, we work with Touch Designer, which is a software, but
Of
it's a
course.
toolbox. I mean, Touch Designer by itself doesn't do anything, but it allows you to prototype whatever you need. So we have our own software. We call it KLC, but it's based on Touch Designer. So we create it in Touch Designer and we modify it there. So we use
I actually
the
I
yeah.
met one of your touch designer programmers
Ah, yeah.
last time I was in Berlin. He the fuck was his name? Daniel
Daniel
Delfovo.
Dalfovo. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's a cool guy, man. He told me about the process and how you guys use touch
Yeah.
designer. And I was just like, of course they're using touch designer. We
Yeah,
do
it's great.
too for
It's great for prototyping, but it's not optimal if you want to create a real standalone software. But since the whole thing is always in process and in development, it's a good environment to continue to prototype in.
Yeah, we use Smode actually. Smode for a
Hmm.
lot of what we do. It's French software, but
Yeah.
we've worked with the developers to
Hmm.
develop the features that we need to do the installations that we're working
Yeah.
on. And I really hope that we're doing a Burning Man installation this year in
Hmm.
conjunction with Mamu Mani. He's like a architect from the UK,
Hmm.
and Studio Drift is going to be part of that. And
Hmm.
I am really hoping that I can work with Studio Drift, and they'll allow me to run patterns like to paint on their swarm, because I would really like to bring that swarm concept into Smode and use Smode to generate the algorithmic light patterns that
Yeah.
are driven on that surface. So who knows? We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, Burning Man is a great place for collaboration, man. And there's a lot of really cool artists doing a lot of really unique things that you can be part of. And a lot of them are very well funded.
Mm. Yeah,
So
I saw there's all these camps by billionaires basically who have their kind
yes,
of
there
own
are.
like little village there and then funding artists to create a pavilion or something like that. That's
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, there are. There are. And I'm sure that you know some of those billionaires who might throw you some
Not yet.
money to
Maybe. Maybe
well, I mean, you'd be
someone will
surprised.
contact us.
I was gonna say a lot of people go to Burning Man, and you know, a lot of those wealthy people are looking to make a statement, and it's
Yeah, no,
it's kind of a mixed bag. You know, I look at that and I'm like, well, that's kind of what is ruining Burning Man, but it's also what is pushing Burning Man
it's driving
to,
it.
to
Yeah.
yeah. So it's hard to say like if it's a net positive or a net negative.
It's probably both. I mean, the sculptures and the installations are getting bigger and more elaborate and so on, but of course that costs more money. So if you need more money, needs funding, and funding comes from someone who wants something back for it and so on. I mean, that's the kind of the closed loop that these things have. So it's good and bad, of course, at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's some of these things are purchased before they ever even get built for Burning Man. So
Yeah, I
like
heard so.
you'll have Las Vegas, and Vegas, you know, some developer in Vegas pays for somebody's Burning Man sculpture, and then as soon as it's done, it goes right to Las Vegas and gets installed.
Yeah, yeah. The Mio Wolf also has their location there, right? They have some Burning Man sculptures in the parking lot, I think.
They do. I actually
Yeah,
went and visited. I visited their the hell is it called? It's Area 51.
yeah, Area
Area 51.
51, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. You know, when I went and I saw the installation. It's not just Meow Wolf. It's like Meow Wolf is one part of it, and then there's all of
Mm,
these other activations and installations galleries in that area.
yeah.
And um, some of my good friends, like I was looking at this installation. I'm like, that looks like Playmode's work. And
Mm.
I texted my friend at Playmode. I'm like, guys, did you do this? And they're like, yeah, we did. And I'm like, your name is nowhere on it. Like,
Yeah,
why
yeah,
is your name like on it?
yeah,
And I think they do have a place where they credit the artists, but it's
mm,
like when I saw that, I was just like, man, the artists should be first and foremost. Their names
yeah,
should
that's
be
true.
right out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, Playmodes is a really cool group, man. I don't know if you they're out of Barcelona. I don't know if you've heard of them, but
Yeah, yeah, I know
they
them.
create.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I follow them on Instagram. I know everyone, I think. Following
Yeah,
everyone.
it's a small world.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
It's very small. Yeah. It's like
we
a
all know each other.
thin layer around the planet, basically, and everyone is kind of connected there with everyone. I also saw that you interviewed Nick from the Mind Buffer project. They have this 3D sculpture thing they built, and yeah, I met him here in Berlin. They built a sculpture here in a place just like I don't know 500 meters from here. They
Yeah,
built this
he's
morph sculpture. Really cool thing.
he's a cool guy. He is a cool guy, and
Yeah.
that sculpture is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Insane. There's so much stuff in it.
It
It's
is, man.
tightly packed. Yeah.
And did you know that he did both the mechanical and the electrical engineering
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that?
I know. I met him. Yeah, yeah, he's crazy. And it looks, the quality is really good of it too. You know, it doesn't look like a prototype or anything. It looks really like a product, really good quality.
It does, man.
I was
That's
just
another.
afraid for them that they really quickly get copied from some Chinese company to kind of do that too. This is always the problem with those art projects.
Yeah, I don't know if he's trying to make a product out of it though. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he's trying to make a product. I talked to him at length about that.
Yeah. but someone else will, that's the thing. That's always the problem.
Have you faced that?
Of
Have people ripped
course,
off your?
everyone in China is 10 thousands of people copying our stuff, like literally,
Yeah, but
like
they're no
every
good.
light object we come out with, 3 months later, they have the exact same thing. They even copied our whole trade fair stand once for one trade fair in, I don't know, Guangzhou or somewhere. And the background of their trade fair stand was a 5 by 3 meter picture that I personally took of one of our installations. I mean,
Oh
it's
my God.
crazy. Yeah, they copy everything, but you have to take that as a compliment, I guess. My ideas are probably pretty good. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. You can buy winches, light elements, everything now, also from China. Of course, the
Yeah, but they're
quality
not.
is
They're
not
not.
the same, but
The
yeah,
quality's not the same.
no,
We were
no.
looking into Kinetic Rain. Do you know that installation, Kinetic Rain? It's in the
From
Shanghai
this is
airport.
this is from my professor Joachim Sauter from ArtCom. This is
Yeah,
where
I'm
I
actually.
studied. I studied with him in art school. He was my professor.
So I know a couple of the engineers,
Yeah,
the kinetic engineers that were part of that project,
yeah,
and we were thinking about doing we were talking to a client about doing a kinetic installation not too long ago, and
mm,
we were researching motors, and the only motors that would be suitable were yours, and
mm.
then there's this other German company that makes servos that are quiet enough to use.
Beckhoff. It's Beckhoff. Yeah,
Yeah, back
mm,
off. So
yeah,
no one else. There's no one else.
yeah,
You can't get them from
yeah.
China. You can't get
Yeah,
those. You can't buy those Chinese winches. They're too loud.
yeah, and also the quality. I mean, the cable is fucked. If you do a permanent installation, it's after 1 month, it's completely done. You have to change the cable. So our stuff
Right.
is made for like permanent installs running up to, I don't know, 12 hours a day continuously, and the running parts are all the moving parts are specified to last at least a year. So that's of course a different level of quality. But if you want to do a show or a one night party or whatever, use the Chinese system, it kind of looks okay probably, but it just doesn't have the durability and also no safety features. We're in Germany, so we have to include a lot of safety stuff, because moving things above heads is potentially quite dangerous. So we have to have a very high standard in that. But then people in other countries, they don't care about this. One time there was a guy from Iran, he wanted to buy a system from us, and I explained him why it's so expensive because we have all these safety functions in. And then he was like, safety? What are you talking about? I'm from Iran. Okay. I mean, it wasn't convincing to him because it just didn't matter. So I had no arguments why my system is so expensive compared to others. So it always depends on what quality you need for what reason. If you want to do something simple, probably a Chinese winch is okay. If you want, like the ABBA show, for example, that we're now doing the install, or the Hakkasan, you could not use a Chinese system. It would be broken
No.
after really short time and just not on that level. But then again, Chinese guys, they also make my iPhone, so they can do quality. So eventually they
They
will
can.
catch up.
You know what I've always found is that China can copy hardware,
Hmm.
but
Not
the
software,
design, the
not design.
content,
Yeah.
what goes. All right. So say somebody
Yeah.
copies your win, like makes a thing.
Hmm.
90%. And I don't. I want to say this in a way that's tactful, or at least not as
Yeah, but
least
they're
offensive as
clever. They
possible.
also copy my
The
arrangement,
content is not there. The content and the design is not there, right? So even if
Uh,
somebody copied your system, man, who is making the content?
yeah,
Who is making the content? And
yeah,
the content is what makes these art pieces stand out, right? It
mm,
makes them beautiful pieces of work rather than
yeah,
just a random, like a collection of blinking hardware, right?
yeah,
We can all put together LEDs. Like there's infinite LED art on the playa, and
yeah,
99% of it is garbage because
yeah,
the
yeah,
programming and the design is not there.
yeah,
Um,
true,
and
right.
when you look at LEDs are LEDs, but there's a what you're doing, what we're doing, and what you see, on the facade of a convenience store where it says blink, 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 open. It's like it's not even the
Yeah,
same thing, but
yeah,
it's using the same technology. So it
yeah,
really comes down to content and design. You can't copy
mm,
that as easily.
no. No, they're not copying it, but learning. I mean, I also teach sometimes at art school in China, and I have friends there, and they're on the right level. Like the young kids coming out of art school today, they know design, and they even have their own style that eventually we will copy in a couple of
Yeah.
years from now. Like Japan was in the 90s on the forefront of every consumer product that we wanted to have with Sony and also other things. I think China will be soon because they're such a big country, and it's mainly about education and how you get how where you get your inspiration from, and they're studying abroad, and they're studying worldwide, and then including their own kind of culture into that, and doing things in a different way, like color schemes, for example, they are choosing, or shapes and things that are different from what we are used to and what we are doing. So I think the next generation is really we will look up to them at some point. So I have no illusions about it. It was a good time while they were looking up to us, but they're up to speed, I think, already.
That's interesting. So you're teaching a school, you're teaching at an art school in China?
Yeah, sometimes I give lectures, like or workshop, 1 week workshop, or I just meet with professors or something like that. So I know what's going on and how it has changed over the last 10 years. So first time I was in Shanghai was maybe 15 years ago, something like that. No, that's
Yeah.
not true. That's longer. That was 2000. It's almost 20 years ago. I was there the first time. So it changed so much, and they're so much up to speed on everything. And I think they're good to go for the next round. This can be interesting. And you were asking, where's the next kind of big push coming from? It's probably from China. We just don't see it coming yet, but they will come up with stuff that has nothing to do with what we are used to or what we are socialized with. Also in terms of music and so on, they were kind of absorbing everything that we had to offer, and I think now they will kind of digest it and then come up with their own version of something, or their totally alternative kind of
Well, it'll be
thing.
interesting to see
Uh,
because, the other question is there like the creative freedom to do something completely new
mhm.
in that political environment? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they able?
That's the question, what they're doing politically, and how that's influencing the society there. That's definitely something that's unclear at this moment, that I'm, yeah, also very unhappy about, that this openness that China had for the last years, and I was traveling there a lot, and I just felt like almost like home, and now it feels so far away again, and they kind of closing off a little bit. So I don't know if that's continuing like that, but they're like, their bubble is so big, it's probably enough to kind of, like breathe inside the bubble and create new things. And I think as long as people stay inside that bubble, they're kind of relatively free to create in a certain way, especially if
Yeah.
it's like visual expression or technological visual developments or stuff like that. I think in that sense, they're relatively free to do whatever works. So I'm in any case like expecting interesting things to come from there. The only question is if we can participate. If they're closing off that much, then that's a problem. And
I hope we
eventually,
are, man. I hope we are because
yeah, I want to be part of it because I really hate that separating countries from each other and stuff. I really don't like it.
do you travel abroad much?
Yeah, I was traveling like 100 days a year minimum so far, and
Oh my
now
God.
during Corona, almost nothing. So I'm really kind of a bit on a standstill, and want to get out there again. At some point, it was almost too much traveling, but I also really enjoy it because it gives you a different perspective on your own country. And that's why I think everyone should travel a lot, even if it's to weird countries or countries that have different political system or opinions or whatever. It's also opening up your mind about your own country and your own society, and you get a different view. Like the first country like far away that I went was when I studied in Chicago. I've never been anywhere outside of Europe before, and there was also 9/11 happening when I was in Chicago in art school. Like I saw on the TV burning towers, and we were evacuated because there's Sears Tower next to
Yeah.
the university. And I saw America in that moment, and I also had a look at my own country from far away and how small it actually is and insignificant in the play of the world, and that gave me a really interesting new perspective on where I come from and how German I actually am. Because I don't like Germany. I have nothing to do with these people. I want to be a world citizen, or I think America is great, or always wanted to be somewhere else. But then when I was somewhere else for a longer time, I got a totally new perspective on my own country and figured out how much German, of course, I am. Like, you cannot get rid of this. You're social.
No, you always we all come from somewhere, and
Yeah,
it's funny. I,
exactly.
I come from the other side of the United States,
Yeah,
and it's less dramatic than German to the United States, but it was definitely a culture shock when I moved to the West Coast. And
yeah,
now I've been here for 10, 12 years, and I still know, like, I am from New England. I'm
yeah,
from Boston. That
yeah,
is
yeah,
who I am because I
yeah,
grew up there. You
yeah.
can't get rid of that.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Even living in Berlin, and I'm from the countryside in the very south of Germany, Switzerland border. Even that is it's a different society, a different way how people are thinking, and that's just inside of a really small country. So that's already interesting. But then, like, having friends in China and having lived there for a while and being there frequently and so on, I also kind of can understand their way of thinking a little bit. So not everything is as black and white as it's portrayed in our Western media, how that country is and why they're doing things, how they do them, and so on. I can a little bit understand that if you're inside of that country, you have a different view on things, and not both of it is only bad or only good. As you could
Sure.
see with your own country, one guy is ruling the country, and everyone thinks, "Oh, what is America doing?" And they're bad. And then it's another guy, and all of a sudden, America is cool again. I mean, America is always both, and China is
Right.
also both of it. And you cannot see it this like monothematic and just in one way. That's what I learned from traveling it a lot. Like the main thing I know about China is that I don't understand it at all, but I'm okay with
Yeah.
that. They're just different. They're not
Yeah.
worse, or they're not bad, or they're not anything. They're very, very different. So it's really hard to comprehend what is their aim. Or also, if you look at what Russia is doing at the moment, this is not random, or this is not uncalculated. There's something behind this. It's not
Of
only
course.
a negative attack on our Western system. They also want to be heard, but and want to kind of how to say, like, make us understand there's a different way of thinking, that and we don't understand it. If that's the only
Yeah.
thing that we take away from it, so those
So I
things are
think that
not not.
travel gives you perspective,
Yes,
right? And
exactly.
it's
That's the
perspective to
summary. Yeah,
understand multiple
yeah,
sides
yeah, totally.
of a
Yeah,
story.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Um, it is very important.
yeah. And
Travel is
that I miss. And I also think it's a problem because people are now so isolated in their own countries. They also keep too much to themselves and kind of cook in their own juice instead of like kind of expanding their mind. And if it's only going to Spain in summer for the beach holiday, you meet Spanish guys and you're open to another culture. And that's not
right.
happening at the moment. That's why this kind of radicalization is kind of happening all over the planet. I think open traveling will really help to kind of maybe resolve those conflicts a little bit.
I hope so, man. I really
Getting
do.
very political here.
Yeah. I mean, I think travel definitely helps.
Yeah,
Speaking of which, I will be in Berlin in the not too distant future. So
great.
when I'm there, we should go out and get a drink. I would
Oh,
love to hang out in
definitely,
person.
definitely. Let me know. Yeah, and of course, check out Dark Matter if you want. And yeah, welcome to come to my studio. Hopefully in summer, because in summer Berlin is great, in winter it's just gray. Yeah,
No, 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 I know. But we're almost through winter, and I think
yeah,
that yeah, I probably will come towards at least the spring.
Yeah,
So
spring is okay too. Yeah, everything after around May, June, then it starts to get really good. Yeah,
cool, man. Well, let's plan on it. Let's
super.
plan
Looking
on
forward.
hanging
Yeah,
out when I'm in Berlin. And if you're ever on the West Coast, wherever on the West Coast,
I
you
hope
got to let me
so.
know, and
Yeah,
I'll come out and visit.
great. Yeah, I really hope to come to the US soon again because I've also go normally like 3, 4, 5 times a year, and I really miss that. Yeah,
You will. I mean, things are opening up again, and
I also
events are
think
starting to
so.
happen
Yeah,
again, and
yeah, yeah.
it's
It will be
business is
interesting.
starting to
Maybe
move.
everything comes back with double force. That could be one option. That would be really exciting.
Or we're feeling it. We're feeling that everything is starting to roll, and I'm sure it will just continue to snowball. So,
Good to hear.
well, listen, dude, I'm really stoked that we got to talk. I feel like I know
Cool.
you so much better now, and
Nice to, yeah, get to meet you.
absolutely.